I never thought I would have to fight for the simple right to drive up my own driveway. But when that HOA Karen parked her SUV across the narrow entrance to my lake cabin ranch, glaring at me like she owned the place, I knew this wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about respect, freedom, and standing my ground. That day, I put the plow on my old truck, pointed it straight ahead, and let her know I was done playing nice. Let us know where you're watching from today. And if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. I had been gone for nearly 3 weeks, spending time in the city to handle some work and gather supplies. By the time I drove my old Ford pickup toward the lake cabin, the sun was already slipping behind the tree line, painting the horizon with that soft orange glow I had always loved. My cabin sat on a stretch of land that belonged to my family for over 60 years. A place where I could breathe without hearing the constant chatter of HOA board members or the barking of their pointless rules. But that day, as I turned onto the gravel path leading to my cabin, my jaw tightened. A shiny silver SUV was parked sideways right across my driveway. It wasn't just blocking my path. It was parked like someone had dropped a boulder on my road just to prove a point. I stopped my truck, letting the engine idle as it started, half expecting the driver to move. When the door of the SUV opened, out came a woman with a bright red blazer, her chin tilted up like she was about to auction off my property. It was Karen. Not just any Karen, but the one who had been the thorn in my side since last spring. She was the self-appointed guardian of the HOA rules, which didn't even cover my land. She had no say over my property, but that never stopped her from trying. With a smirk on her face, she crossed her arms and said, "You can't drive in here today. We have a community event, and this road is for residents only." He let out a laugh, the kind that comes from deep in your chest when someone pushes you too far. "Ma'am, this is my land. That road you're standing on, it's mine. And if you don't move that SUV, you're about to find out just how much I value my driveway." Her eyes narrowed like she was measuring my patience. "We'll have to follow the rules. This isn't just about you. It's about the community." I stepped out of my truck, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. "Karen, I don't live under your HOA. Your rules don't mean a damn thing here. You're trespassing." She raised her phone like a weapon. "If you so much as touch my car, I'm calling 911. For a moment, I just stood there, feeling the cool evening air whip past my face. I wasn't going to play her game, but I wasn't backing down either. "Call them," I said. "I'll be here waiting. And while we're at it, I'll have a word with the sheriff about your SUV blocking my property." The wind picked up, rattling the branches overhead. She didn't expect me to stand there so calmly. I could see it in Herias. This wasn't the usual homeowner she could bully with fines and letters taped to the door. I was raised on this land, worked my own hands into the dirt to make it mine, and I wasn't about to let someone with a clipboard and a smug attitude tell me otherwise. When she didn't move, I got back in my truck. My hand tightened on the steering wheel as I stared at her SUV. I could have pushed through right then, but something told me this was only the start of something bigger. Karen wasn't going to stop. This was a battle she wanted, and I was about to give it to her. I turned the truck around and parked by the edge of the lake. From where I sat, I could see the cabin's roofline peeking over the trees. I could almost taste the peace that place gave me, the kind that came from early mornings on the porch with black coffee and the quiet hum of the water. And now that peace was being threatened by someone who thought rules mattered more than common sense. As I sat there, I thought about all the times I had let little things slide. The notes she left about maintaining appearances. The call Stowe animal control because she said my dog barked too much. The way she glared at me like I didn't belong here. It all added up. And now seeing her car blocking my path, I realized this wasn't just about my driveway. It was about drawing the line. I stepped out again, walked up to her SUV, and stared at her through the window. "Last chance. Karen, move the car." She rolled the window down halfway, her voice sharp and mocking. "You think you can just scare me? I'll call the police right now. Let's see how they feel about your attitude." I grinned, leaning slightly toward her window. "Good. Tell them to bring a tow truck. I'll wait right here." Her face flushed with anger, but she didn't call. Not yet. We were both standing our ground, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I knew this was only going to get worse before it got better. That night, I didn't make it into my cabin. I slept in my truck by the lake, watching the moonlight dance on the water, planning my next move. By dawn, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I woke to the sound of geese honking across the lake and the sharp chill of dawn creeping through the truck's windows. My back ached from sleeping upright, but my mind was sharper than ever. As I sipped from a thermos of yesterday's coffee, I thought about Karen and how this feud had started long before she decided to block my driveway. When I first bought this lake cabin ranch, most of the neighbors were decent folks. We'd wave at each other across the road, trade homemade pies during the holidays, and lend a hand whenever storms rolled through. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Then Karen moved in last spring. She arrived with her shiny SUV, her loud opinions, and an obsession with HOA rules like she was born to enforce them. The irony was, my property wasn't even under their HOA jurisdiction. My land had been here before the HOA even existed, with deeds and boundaries clearly drawn. Still, Karen took it upon herself to act like my driveway and yard were part of her kingdom. The first time we clashed, it was over my old barn. She claimed it was an eyesore and demanded I painted a certain color to match the community standard. I told her the barn was older than her HOA and I'd paint it purple if I wanted. That didn't go over well. After that, she started leaving notes on my gate. Complaints about my grass being too wild, about the sound of my dog barking when I worked late at night, even about the smoke from my fire pit drifting toward her porch. Every note had that condescending tone as if I were a teenager getting scolded. I ignored most of them, but it got under my skin. Who gave her the right to tell me how to live on my own land? One incident stood out above all the others. It was early summer, and I'd parked my truck near the lake to unload some firewood. When I came back, I found Karen standing there with her arms crossed, scolding a group of kids who had wandered onto the shore. They weren't doing anything wrong, just skipping stones and laughing like kids do. She was yelling about trespassing and community safety. I stepped in, told her to cool it, and reminded her that this lake wasn't her private playground. She turned on me with a fury I won't forget. "You think you're above the rules because you live out here by yourself?" She spat. Well, not anymore. That's when I realized she wasn't just a nuisance. She was the kind of person who needed control, and she was willing to push until someone pushed back. And now, with her SUV blocking my driveway, it was clear she was ready for another fight. As I drove back up the gravel road, I saw her standing beside her car again, phone in hand. She had that smug look on her face, the kind that says she already thinks she's won. I stopped a few feet away and stepped out. "Morning," I said, as calm as I could manage. "You're trespassing," she shot back like it was rehearsed. I laughed, shaking my head. "On my own land, Karen. You've lost it. This road is part of the community," she snapped. "We voted on new parking rules, and this access is now restricted." "Voted?" I took a step closer. "Let me guess, by you and your friends who don't own this road." Her lips tightened. She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her phone like a badge. "One call to the sheriff and you'll regret this." I crossed my arms, staring her down. "Go ahead. He and I played football together in high school. I'll tell him to bring donuts." Her face turned red. And for a moment, I thought she might actually throw the phone at me, but she didn't. She just got in her SUV, slammed the door, and revved the engine like a challenge. I stood my ground, watching as she finally backed up and sped off, gravel spitting from her tires. As her car disappeared, I felt the tension roll off me. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen wasn't the type to retreat quietly. She'd be back, probably with some new scheme or complaint. That's when I decided I needed to prepare, not just for the next argument, but for a full-blown battle if it came to that. I spent the rest of the day at the cabin, patching up the porch and clearing out brush, all while keeping an eye on the road. Every crunch of tires in the distance made me tense, half expecting her to return with reinforcements. But the only visitors were the deer at the tree line and a hawk circling high above. By evening, I sat on the porch with a plate of beans and cornbread, thinking about my next move. I wasn't just going to defend my driveway. I was going to put an end to this nonsense once and for all. If Karen wanted to play games with rules, I'd bring the law into it. I'd make sure she understood exactly where her power ended and mine began. The cabin was quiet that night, but my mind wasn't. I knew tomorrow would bring something new, and I was ready. The next morning, I woke up to the rumble of tires crunching on gravel. Or for a moment, I thought it was a delivery truck or maybe a neighbor passing through. But when I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee, I saw that silver SUV again, sitting at the mouth of my driveway like an oversized guard dog. Karen was already out of the vehicle, pacing back and forth, talking on her phone like she was orchestrating some grand operation. "Yeah, officer. He's threatening me," she said loud enough for me to hear. "This man is blocking community access. You need to send someone down here right now." I nearly laughed out loud, threatening her I hadn't even spoken to her yet this morning. I set my coffee cup on the porch railing and walked toward the gate, slow and steady, my boots kicking up small clouds of dust. "You really called the cops?" I asked. My voice was calm, but there was a steel edge in it. Karen spun around with that triumphant look plastered on her face. "You leave me no choice. You can't just intimidate people and think you can get away with it. This is community property now." I shook my head, letting out a low whistle. "Community property, lady. This driveway has been in my family since the 1960s. I have the deed framed inside my cabin. You're trespassing, plain and simple." She glared at me. "That little cabin of yours doesn't make you special. We all have to follow the same standards." The same standards. I leaned on the gate, crossing my arms. "Your HOA doesn't even reach this far. You know it and I know it. This is about you trying to bully people until they fold." She didn't answer, just pointed at my truck like it was evidence of a crime. "You've been parking your rust bucket on community land." I laughed, shaking my head. "Community land? Karen, you're standing on my driveway, my land. You want to see the paperwork? Fine. We'll let the sheriff read it to you. Right on cue." I heard the crunch of another set of tires. A county deputy pulled up in a tan SUV, his lights flashing lazily. I recognized him the moment he stepped out. It was Deputy Miller. We'd known each other since high school. Karen's smugness wavered for just a moment when she saw me wave at him. "Miller," I said with a grin. "Glad you came. We've got a trespasser blocking my driveway." Karen jumped in before he could reply. "Officer, this man is aggressive. He threatened me yesterday. He refuses to follow community regulations." "He holdin', ma'am," Miller said, holding up his hand. "Let's slow down." He turned to me. "This your property line, right?" "Yep." I said, "All the way to that big oak tree and 50 yards past the lake shore. Been in my family for decades. I've got the deed inside if you need proof." Karen's eyes widened. "You can't just take his word for it. He's been blocking this access road for weeks." Miller gave her a look I'd seen him use on rowdy bar patrons. "Ma'am, if this is his driveway and he owns the land, you don't have any right to block it." Karen's mouth opened, then shut. For once, she didn't have a comeback. "Do you want to press trespassing charges?" Miller asked me because I can write this up. I looked at Karen, who was now shifting uncomfortably, her SUV still parked across my path. For a second, I considered letting the law take its course. But I knew this wasn't just about today. If I pressed charges now, it would only pour gasoline on the fire. It needed a bigger plan. "Not today," I said. "But I'll need her off my land right now." Miller nodded. "Ma'am, you need to move your vehicle." Karen huffed like a child caught misbehaving, but she got back into her SUV and backed away. As her car disappeared, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "That woman trouble for you?" Miller asked. "You have no idea," I said. "And something tells me this isn't the last time I'll be calling you." He smirked. "Better get your paperwork in order. Folks like her only understand two things, law and force." He wasn't wrong. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a pile of old deeds, maps, and property surveys. If Karen wanted to play legal games, I'd make sure I was ready to hit her twice as hard. It wasn't just about my driveway anymore. It was about setting boundaries she couldn't cross. By the time the sun dipped below the trees, I had a plan forming in my mind. And if Karen thought yesterday's standoff was me being aggressive, she hadn't seen anything yet. After the showdown with Karen and the visit from Deputy Miller, I knew it was time to get serious. The woman wasn't going to stop with warnings or arguments. If I wanted real peace at my lake cabin ranch, I needed to back my words with hard facts and the kind of legal authority that couldn't be twisted or ignored. The next morning, I drove into town. My first stop was the county clerk's office. The building itself was an old brick structure with creaky wooden floors and the smell of paper and ink that had lingered for decades. Inside, I met with Mr. Henderson, a wiry man with silver hair and reading glasses that always slid to the end of his nose. He'd been working there for over 30 years, and he knew the ins and outs of every property line in this county. "Well, if it isn't Luke," he said as I walked in. "What brings you here? Don't tell me that Karen lady is causing you trouble again." I chuckled bitterly. "She's worse than ever. Parked her SUV across my driveway, called the cops, and claimed my road is community property. I need every document that proves she's full of it. Henderson pushed his glasses up and gave me a slow nod. I figured it would come to this sooner or later. Let me pull the original deeds and easements. Hedis appeared into the back room and I waited, tapping my fingers on the counter. When he returned, he had a stack of yellowed papers in a manila folder. Here's the original land survey from the 1960s when your grandfather bought that place. See this line here? He pointed at a black-inked border. That's your driveway. Clear as day, as HOA jurisdiction stops half a mile before your property. They don't have a leg to stand on. I grinned, feeling a surge of relief. Mind making me certified copies? I want these ready for when she tries something again. Already on it, he said with a smile. While the copies were being made, I asked Henderson a few questions about property rights. He told me something that sparked an idea. Because I own the easement leading to the cabin, I had the legal right to control who could access it. If I wanted to, I could post signs, build a gate, even ban vehicles like hers from coming through. That got my wheels turning. After leaving the clerk's office, I drove over to see an attorney, Marlene Walker, who had handled a few cases for me in the past. She was sharp as a tack, with a reputation for cutting through legal nonsense like a hot knife through butter. I laid out the situation from Karen's constant harassment to the recent standoff. She listened carefully, jotting down notes, then looked at me with a wry smile. She doesn't have a case. In fact, if she keeps trespassing or blocking your driveway, you could file a civil complaint and seek damages. I can draft a formal notice warning her to stay off your property. That's exactly what I need. I said something official that'll wipe that smug grin off her face. Marlene leaned back in her chair. You know these HOA types count on intimidation. They throw around fake rules and hope people don't push back. You, on the other hand, have all the legal cards. She drafted the notice while I waited. It was a clean, nonsense document that spelled out my property boundaries, my rights, and the consequences of interfering with them. Holding that paper in my hands felt like holding a weapon, one far stronger than a plow or a pickup truck. On the drive back to the cabin, I spotted Karen's SUV parked near the community entrance, as if she were waiting to pounce. I didn't stop, but I slowed just enough for her to see the stack of documents on my dashboard. Her eyes narrowed, and I knew she could sense I was up to something. Let her stew on that, I thought. Back at the cabin, I went to work. I posted a clear sign at the start of my driveway, private property. No unauthorized vehicles. It wasn't fancy, just bold black letters on a white background, but it sent a clear message. Then I parked my old plow truck right at the gate just in case. As the sun began to set, I sat on the porch, looking at the road with a calm I hadn't felt in days. The papers were ready. The law was on my side, and I was prepared to defend my land with every tool I had. Karen could call the cops, call her HOA board, call whoever she wanted. It wouldn't matter now. I had the proof, and I had the will. That night, as I listened to the crickets and the gentle lapping of the lake water, I thought about how far this had gone. It wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about standing up for something bigger. The principle that no one gets to bully you out of what's rightfully yours. And the next time Karen showed up, I'd be ready to make that clear. The next day, I woke with a sense of determination humming through my veins. I knew Karen would come back. People like her don't take no as the final answer. Sure enough, just after lunch, I heard the distant growl of her SUV. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, as the silver beast rolled down my gravel road like it owned the place. She parked sideways again, but this time she didn't even bother with a fake smile. "Take that sign down," she barked, pointing toward the new private property sign I'd planted the day before. "You're violating community regulations." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Karen, that sign is on my land, and if you're too blind to see that, maybe I'll give you a lesson you won't forget." She tilted her head, smirking. "Oh, really? You think your old truck scares me?" That was all I needed to hear. I walked to the barn, Karen's voice trailing after me like a buzzing mosquito. Inside the barn, my old Ford pickup sat waiting, its rusty front bumper gleaming in the dim light. I'd already mounted the plow on it earlier in the week, a heavy steel blade that I usually used for clearing snow in winter. Today it was for something else entirely. I started the engine. The deep rumble filled the barn and rolled out into the open air. Karen stopped talking. She watched wide-eyed as I eased the truck forward. The plow's edge scraped against the gravel, throwing up sparks as I lined up the truck directly with her SUV. "What do you think you're doing?" she yelled, her voice breaking. I rolled down the window. I told you yesterday. Karen, you're not blocking my driveway again. You wouldn't dare, she hissed, holding her phone up like a weapon. I'm filming this. You'll regret it. I grinned, inching the truck closer. Good. Make sure you get my good side. The plow's blade came within a foot of her bumper. She panicked, scrambling to get back into her SUV. I kept creeping forward, slow and steady, letting the metal edge push a pile of gravel closer and closer to her tires. My heart was pounding, but I didn't waver. This wasn't about violence or destruction. It was about showing her that I wasn't bluffing. "You're insane!" she screamed from inside the SUV. "I'm calling 911 again." "Go ahead," I said, loud enough for her camera to catch it. "Tell them how you blocked my driveway and got plowed out of the way." Finally, she threw the SUV into reverse, tires spitting rocks as she backed up and tore off down the road. I stopped the truck and sat there breathing hard. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the rush of standing my ground. For the first time in weeks, I felt in control. After Karen sped off, I parked the truck right at the end of the driveway like a barricade. I wasn't going to give her a second chance to play these games. Then I called Deputy Miller just to make sure my bases were covered. "She blocking you again?" Miller asked when he picked up. "Not anymore," I said with a chuckle. "Let's just say I encouraged her to leave." There was a pause on the line, then a loud laugh. "Luke, I can't officially condone whatever you just did, but I'm glad you're standing your ground. If she files a complaint, you've got the paperwork to back you up." "Exactly," I said. "And I'll be ready for her next move." By evening, the road was quiet again. I sat on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sunset stain the sky with shades of gold and crimson. For the first time in days, I felt like my cabin was truly mine again. But I also knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her don't walk away. They plot, they scheme, and they come back harder. And when she did, I'd be ready with more than just a plow. I had the law, the sheriff's support, and enough grit to outlast anyone who tried to push me around. That night I barely slept. Not because I was worried, but because my mind was working on the next step. And Karen's little war had pushed me to dig deeper to make sure I never had to face this nonsense again. Tomorrow I would take my fight straight to the HOA board using every legal tool at my disposal. This wasn't just about a driveway anymore. It was about drawing a line in stone, not sand, and making sure everyone saw it. 2 days after the showdown with my plow truck, I thought maybe Karen had finally gotten the hint. The driveway stayed clear, and the air around the lake was still broken only by the chirping of crickets and the occasional splash of fish breaking the surface. I was fixing the loose boards on the porch when I noticed something unusual near the gate, a crisp white envelope tucked under the latch. There was no stamp, no return address, just my name scribbled in heavy, angry handwriting. I tore it open and skimmed the contents. My jaw tightened as I read through the letter. It was written on official-looking HOA letterhead loaded with accusations and threats. According to the letter, I owed community violation fees for aggressive conduct blocking community access and unauthorized signage. They even threatened to place a lien on my property if I didn't pay up within 10 days. The absurdity of it all made me laugh out loud. My land wasn't under their jurisdiction, and I had the proof. But this was Karen's style bully tactics. Intimidation and empty threats dressed up to look official. By mid-afternoon, I spotted Karen's silver SUV parked by the community clubhouse, flanked by a couple of her allies. They stood in a tight circle, pointing toward my cabin as if they were planning a military operation. I could practically hear her scheming voice from a distance, talking about enforcing standards and teaching me a lesson. I'd had enough. It was time to bring this towhead and stop the games once and for all. The next morning, I drove into town. My first stop was the county clerk's office. It's a small brick building with floors that creak like old saddle leather and the smell of dust and ink lingering in the air. Behind the counter sat Mr. Henderson, a wiry old man with white hair and a pair of glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He had been managing property records for decades and knew every land boundary in the county like the back of his hand. "Well, if it isn't Luke," Henderson said with a knowing smile as I walked in. "Let me guess. This is about that HOA woman, bingo," I said, tossing the letter onto the counter. "She's blocking my driveway, sending fake violation notices, and threatening legal action. You need every document that proves she has zero authority over my land." Henderson chuckled. "I figured it had come to this. I'll get the original deeds and surveys. This won't take long. He returned with a stack of worn papers, spreading them out on the counter like a poker hand. Here's the land survey from 1962, back when your grandfather bought the property. This line here, he pointed with a bony finger, shows your driveway, clear as daylight. Their HOA doesn't even touch this area. They're bluffing. Can I get certified copies? I asked, already knowing the answer. Of course, Henderson replied. If they give you trouble again, wave these in their face, or better yet, hand them to the sheriff. With copies of the deeds in hand, I headed straight to Marlene Walker's law office. Marlene had handled a couple of disputes for me years back and was known for her sharp mind and iron will. She read through the HOA letter, her lips curling into a smirk. This is garbage, she said flatly. They don't have jurisdiction, and they know it. I'll draft a cease and desist letter for you. If they step 1 foot over the line again, we'll file for harassment and trespassing. That's exactly what I need, I said. Make it airtight. Marlene's pen scratched across the paper, and within half an hour I was holding a letter that spelled out every legal fact in black and white. It stated beyond a doubt that Karen and her HOA had no authority over my driveway, no right to demand payment, and no claim to my land. When I got back to the cabin, Karen was waiting. Her SUV was parked just off the road, and she stormed toward me the second I stepped out of my truck. You think that plow stunt scared me? She said, jabbing a finger in my direction. We're finding you $500 for harassment. I didn't even flinch. I held up the legal notice from Marlene like a badge. Funny thing, Karen, according to the county and my attorney, you and your HOA don't own a single inch of this road. You don't have the authority to fine me for anything. Her face twisted as she tried to read the document. This can't be right. Oh, it's right, I said firmly. You step onto my property again, and I'll have you charged for trespassing. The sheriff's already been here. He knows exactly what's going on. For the first time, I saw the confidence drain from her eyes. She stammered something about rules and community safety. But the words rang hollow. This isn't over, she finally snapped. Oh, I think it is, I said, my voice steady, because I'm done letting you push me around. She turned on her heel, got into her SUV, and tore off down the road. A few hours later, I saw 2 of her allies standing near the property line, muttering and pointing at my cabin. I didn't confront them. Instead, I pulled out my phone, filmed them, and called out, "Smile for the camera." My lawyer loves this kind of evidence. They scattered like scared chickens. That evening, I sat on my porch with my dog curled up beside me, a cold beer in hand. The sky turned pink and gold as the sun set, and for the first time in weeks I felt a real sense of calm. But I knew Karen's pride wouldn't let her stop here. People like her always make one last desperate move before they realize they've lost, and I was ready for it. I didn't have to wait long for Karen's final move. The very next afternoon, a thick envelope arrived delivered by hand. This time, the HOA board had signed it themselves, with Karen's name at the bottom in bold ink. They weren't just threatening fines anymore. They claimed that unless I removed my obstructions and complied with community guidelines, they would pursue legal action and permanently restrict my access to the lake road. That was the last straw. I had spent weeks tolerating Karen's games, but this was more than I was willing to swallow. I called Marlene Walker immediately and read every word of the letter over the phone. Marlene laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. They're bluffing. Luke, I'll draft something that'll make them think twice before they ever put their names on a piece of paper like that again. By that evening, Marlene had prepared a legal notice so sharp it could cut glass. The document didn't just threaten action. It laid out the consequences if they so much as touched my property or tried to enforce their fake rules again. We were talking about fines for harassment, damages for obstruction, and a full-blown lawsuit if necessary. I drove into town the next morning to have the notice notarized. Then I made my way to the HOA clubhouse where I knew Karen and her friends held their little meetings. I parked my truck right out front, plow still mounted like a battering ram, and stepped inside. The room went quiet the moment I walked in. Karen was sitting at the head of the table, her face pale but defiant. She crossed her arms and said, "You're trespassing." I smiled, leaning against the doorway. "That's funny. Seems to me you're the ones who've been trespassing for weeks. Here's the deal." I placed the legal notice on the table, sliding it toward her. "Read it, every word, because the next time you set foot on my property or block my driveway, it'll be the sheriff hauling you out, not me sking nicely." Her face flushed as she scanned the first page. "This is outrageous," she muttered, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. "Outrageous," I said. "What's outrageous is you thinking you can bully me with fake rules and phony fines. That stops today. From this moment on, you and your HOA are banned from setting foot on my driveway. You so much as park a wheel on my gravel, and I'll have Miller out there with cuffs." The room was dead silent. A few of the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting between Karen and me. I could tell some of them weren't on board with her antics, but were too scared to cross her. I leaned closer to Karen, my voice low but steady. "You want to keep playing games? Fine. I'll take this all the way to court. I'll win, and when I do, I'll sue you personally for every ounce of stress and time you've cost me. Are we clear?" Her lips tightened, but she didn't answer. That was good enough for me. I turned and walked out, feeling the weight of weeks of frustration lifting off my shoulders. That night, I set up a new gate at the end of my driveway, sturdy steel locked with a heavy chain. It wasn't fancy, but it was enough to make a statement. No more games. I posted another sign beside it. "Private access only. Violators will be prosecuted." The following morning, Karen came driving by, slowing down when she saw the new gate. Her face was a storm cloud, but she didn't stop. She didn't even roll down her window. She just kept going. And I knew then that I had finally won. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a rock. No tension in my shoulders. Now wondering if I'd wake up to find my driveway blocked. My cabin felt like home again. Quiet and unbothered, just the way my grandfather intended when he built it. But victory wasn't just about keeping Karen off my land. It was about the principle of it all, about knowing that I stood my ground when it mattered. I didn't cave, I didn't fold under pressure, and I didn't let someone's inflated sense of power trample on my rights. The next weekend, I threw a small get-together with a few neighbors who'd supported me through the ordeal. We grilled steaks by the lake, laughed about Karen's failed attempts at control, and toasted to the fact that sometimes the only way to deal with bullies is to stand taller than they expect. One neighbor, old Tom, who lived down the road, clapped me on the back and said, "You did what all of us wish we'd done years ago. You told that HOA to shove it." I grinned. "All it takes is a plow truck and a little backbone." Karen never returned to my driveway after that. Whether it was because of the legal notice, the gate, or just the realization that I wasn't going to budge, I didn't care. The war was over and I had my peace back. The following week was the quietest I'd experienced since Karen first decided to turn my life into her personal battlefield. No SUV blocking my driveway, no angry letters tucked under the gate, and no HOA board members prowling around with clipboards. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I woke early that Sunday morning to the gentle light of dawn spreading over the lake. The water was glassy, reflecting the pink and gold sky, and a cool breeze carried the scent of pine through the open window. I brewed a pot of black coffee, stepped onto the porch, and just stood there for a long moment, soaking in the silence. It was the kind of peace I had almost forgotten. The new gate at the end of my driveway glinted in the morning sun, solid and unmoving. I'd installed it with my own 2 hands, welding the hinges and setting the posts deep into the ground. It wasn't just a gate. It was a line drawn in steel that told the world, "This is mine. Respect it." For the first time in a long time, I felt like the land was truly my sanctuary again. Later that day, I walked down to the lake with my dog trotting beside me. The water was cool and clear, and I sat in the old wooden dock my grandfather had built decades ago. I could almost hear his voice telling me, "Luke, if you don't stand up for your land, no one will." Those words had never felt truer than they did now. I thought about everything that had happened. The shouting matches, the plow truck standoff, the legal battle that finally brought it all to a close. It wasn't just about a driveway or an HOA anymore. It was about a principle. The belief that we have to stand our ground when someone tries to strip away what's ours. Karen had pushed me to my limit, but she had also reminded me of who I was, a man who doesn't back down when he's in the right. A few neighbors stopped by that afternoon. Tom, the old-timer from down the road, brought over a jug of sweet tea and sat with me on the porch. "Well, Luke," he said, grinning, "looks like you gave that HOA a lesson they won't forget anytime soon." I didn't want to fight, I admitted, sipping my coffee. But I wasn't about to let someone like Karen take away the peace I've worked for. This land, it's part of who I am. Tom nodded, his weathered face softening. You know, a lot of folks around here respect what you did. Not everyone has the guts to stand up to those people. Most just roll over, pay the fees, and hope the trouble stops. You showed them you can't be bullied. We spent the afternoon talking, watching the sun move across the sky. By evening, I lit a fire in the pit by the shore. The flames cracked and popped, sending sparks up into the twilight. I grilled a couple of steaks, and Tom stayed for dinner. As we ate, I felt a sense of gratitude, not just for the food and company, but for the simple fact that I had held on to something worth fighting for. The next morning, I walked the property line, checking the fence and the new private access-only signs I'd posted. Everything was in place. The gravel driveway stretched before me, untouched and clear, leading to the cabin that stood as a symbol of my family's grit and resilience. As I stood there, I realized something. Karen hadn't won a single thing, but she had given me a new perspective. I understood more than ever how important it is to know your rights, to prepare and to fight when necessary. I wasn't just defending a driveway. I was defending the peace and freedom this land gave me. That evening, I sat on the porch with my dog curled at my feet, watching the last light fade over the lake. The sky turned shades of deep orange and purple, and the world grew quiet, except for the soft hum of crickets. I felt an ache of contentment settle in my chest. Looking back, I didn't regret a single thing. Not the plow showdown, not the heated words, and not the countless trips to the clerk's office. All of it had led to this moment of peace. Karen could keep her HOA meetings, her fake rules, and her smug attitude. None of that mattered now. I took a deep breath, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence wash over me. This is how it's supposed to be, I murmured to myself. The lake was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and reminds you of what truly matters. I sat on the porch, watching the fading sun lay a golden path across the water. The plow truck was parked by the gate like a faithful guard, but I no longer felt the tension that had gripped me for weeks. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. I thought of my grandfather, the man who had built this cabin with his own hands. He used to say, "Land isn't just soil and trees. Luke, it's a piece of your soul. Protect it." Those words echoed through me as I looked over the property I had fought so hard to defend. Every board of the porch, every stone in the fire pit, every inch of gravel on the driveway, they all carried my family's history and my sweat. The battle with Karen had been ugly, but it had taught me something about resilience. Standing up for yourself isn't about pride. It's about knowing when silence means surrender and when it's time to push back. I didn't fight because I wanted trouble. I fought because peace is worth defending. As night fell, the lake reflected the stars, each one shimmering like a quiet promise. I leaned back, my dog resting at my feet, and felt a deep, steady calm. No HOA rules, no angry voices, no one trying to take what wasn't theirs. Just me, my land, and the memory of those who taught me to value both. If you've ever stood your ground against something unfair, you know this feeling, the quiet victory of holding on to what matters most. It's not about winning against someone else. It's about winning back your own peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If it struck a chord with you, I invite you to stay a while, subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts, or simply reflect on the battles you've faced and won. Sometimes the stories worth telling are the ones that remind us of the quiet strength we all carry inside.